This is one of those V-band clamps I was talking about. They sit on here. They slide over your exhaust pipe. You weld this on, and they go in like that. That's what this is just a small piece of exhaust pipe in one of those V-band clamps, and I MIG'd it together. So all I've got to do is come off the exhaust manifold and tie up to right here, connect them with a piece of pipe. This is a pre-bent 90. You can get these just about anywhere. Auto parts stores, all kinds of stuff. If I put that right there to come this way, it's going to hang really, really low. And low enough to where I'm concerned I may catch it on something and yank it off the car. So I want a 90 right here, but I need it to be a fairly tight radius to come up and meet up with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some pie cuts out of a straight piece of tubing to make this 90. So let's show you guys how I do that. So I just drew a straight line on the tube. When I make my cuts for my pieces of my pie, I'm just going to keep that line at the top. That way everything's at the same angle. When it makes the 90, it's going to turn 90 degrees. It's not going to kind of snake around and do this or do that. Everything will be right in line. I made this a while ago. This is for 2-inch exhaust tubing. And I just got a straight cut in the middle, and then a 5 degree, a 10 degree, 15, and 20. That's to help me make my pie cuts. So how this thing works, stick this down in here. And I'm going to do the first cut on this piece of tube at 15 degrees. So I line it up with my 15 degree mark. Slide it over here so I got room to put the Sawzall in there. I'll tighten the vise down. And the wood is flexible enough, especially after I cut these slots in it, to where when I tighten the vise down, the fingers kind of bend in and hang on to the pipe. So I just want to make sure my line is right at the top. And I drop my Sawzall in there and make the first cut. A problem that I've got with my little buck here, my little pie cut template, the slots aren't deep enough for me to cut all the way through the pipe in one shot. So I'll loosen it up, take my pipe out, and I've got this little spacer I drop in there. Put this back in, line up my mark and my cut with my 15 degrees again. And I'll go ahead and finish my cut. So now I've got a 15 degree cut on the end of this tube. I'm gonna make my second pie cut. I got my pipe in my buck here and lined up where I want to be on I'm gonna make a series of 15 degree wedges so I can make that turn. So here's the first chunk, the first section of the pie right there. I'll cut another 2 or 3 of those pieces and I'll show you how I put them together. I got my pieces of the pie right here. I'm gonna go ahead and deburr them so I can get ready to weld them together. When you're deburring, just be careful. We're gonna need this line, so don't take off your marker line there when you're doing it. All deburred and ready to go together. I got my first 2 pieces of the pie. They're lightly clamped in the vise. You can't put a whole lot of tension on them or you'll deform them. I took the wire wheel and I went just a little bit this side of my marks. And so that's nice and clean. I'm gonna wipe it with rubbing alcohol and then I'm gonna tack weld it together. I've heard that if you prep this with brake cleaner, that the argon shielding gas from the welder can mix with the evaporated brake clean and make some kind of poisonous gas or something. So I don't know if that's true or not, but because of that, I'm going to use rubbing alcohol to prep that. Number 3. On this last one, I'm using a magnet to hold it in place while I make my tack. And you can see my marker line, all that stuff lines up, so we should have a nice straight turn, if that makes sense, straight turn. All right, I'm gonna MIG this together. I think a better option would be to TIG weld it together. I'm really just not that good of a TIG welder. I have problems with the thin wall tubing like this burning through with the TIG welder, so I'm gonna MIG it. Next, we're going to put our adapter on there for our V-band connection. Took it over to the car and mocked it up and just made a witness mark with a marker so I know where it goes. There's a piece I just made. This is the V-band flange clamp that I keep referencing. These are the flanges welded on. This is how this works. If you look inside here, open this thing up, show it to you guys. There's a groove in there that the two flanges sit in, and when you tighten it down, that groove is V-shaped, and it forces the two flanges together, and they seal against one another. So this is how they go together. Nice about the V-bands, or one nice feature of the V-bands, is that they're clockable. You can spin this any direction you want and it'll still seal. So it gives you some adjustability, which is great for guys like me. They're doing this where it's, when you build it, it's not 100% perfect when you put it together. Here's the manifold side. I've got a pre-bent 90. I'm going to use that on this side. Here's our V-band flange. Slide that over our pre-bent 90 like that. Weld it right here. And then this will assemble. We can clock it, point it at that, and then all we have to do is connect the two. One thing I want to point out to you guys is the gap, the distance there between the flange and the pipe. So even though it's a 2-inch V-band, I'm tight over on this side, but I got a pretty good gap going on right there, and that's because I'm doing this on a pre-bent 90. So I'm able to fill that in with the MIG welder, but there's probably a better way to do it, but this is how I'm doing it. Here's our pie cut elbow that we made earlier. I made my last pie cut on this piece of flex tubing. That's what I'm going to use to connect the manifold and the turbo. These guys go together like this to complete that turn. So I'm going to weld this on, and then I got one more weld on the other end, and the hot side construction phase is over. Alright, so gluing everything together with the welder for the passenger side, hot side is done. The driver side is done as well. I'm going to go ahead and spend some quality time on this, just me and the grinder, and clean up all these welds and make this thing look acceptable. And then I might hit it with some high temp black paint. So once I get it all cleaned up, maybe get it painted and get it on the car, I'll show you guys what it looks like. I want to know if any of my welds are going to leak. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to fill this pipe up with water, and that'll show me if any of this stuff's leaking. I don't know if you guys will be able to see it, but I got some water coming out right there, and then I have another one right there. I've got two pinholes. So instead of trying to put a tack from the MIG welder and fill those in, I'm going to grab my TIG welder, and I'm going to try to do it without any filler rod and just this piece of metal, and the wire from the MIG welder. I'm going to try to fuse all that together. And if I do that with the TIG, then it won't leak. Here's our hot side plumbing complete. Off the manifold right there, down to the turbo, piece of flex pipe in the middle. Pretty simple piece. Time consuming to create though. And here's the other one off of this manifold, and that turbo's not on the car right now, but that's where it'll go. So hot side's all done.